Being the engineering manager, that mostly means that I keep track of everything that's going on, which is why I'm giving this talk. I very rarely have time to write code, which is why you don't see me that often on GitHub. Yeah. As I go into kind of the further out details, it is still a bit foggy. Priorities may change over time, so the things that are happening now are actively happening, and the things that are in the future may or may not happen depending on how priorities shift. I'll try to give you an idea of how certain we are of each thing. Our current focus has been on making Blockly very more customizable and more accessible. So you've seen a lot of that in the features that Monica just talked about. Um, Around rendering, uh, that's a completely new API. So over the next few months, we will be continuing to clean that up, responding to feedback. And we are also working on a second rendering style that is in the style of scratch and make code. Because we've heard from a lot of developers that Blockly is kind of outdated at this point and probably needs a refresh. The plan is to support both rendering styles going forward. We know a lot of teachers and a lot of educators have built content around the current style, and so that will continue to work uh, for the foreseeable future. But anyone who wants to update to a newer appearance that is more friendly, that will be coming into Blockly hopefully in the next release. Around continuing customization, we're looking at where else we can add kind of easy hooks and easy changes to make your lives easier. We know that strings are kind of a pain point still. Integrating your own messages into Blockly, especially if you have localization, can be a pain. So that's something we'd like to look at. Uh, Themes we will continue to build out. Right now, you can use them to customize colors, to change the background colors in Blockly, but we know that they could do a lot more. So let us know if you are making very superficial changes to Blockly, things that we could make easy by just adding it into themes, and we'll hopefully prioritize those. And more APIs. If there are things in Blockly that you are overriding or replacing or changing, let us know. If there are common things that a lot of people are changing or overriding, we'd like to make those hooks or template methods so that you can do that without having to modify core Blockly. Uh, our eventual goal is to have Blockly as a library be in a state where you can import it into your project and then just override all of the things you need without having to rebuild it or modify anything in the Blockly files. So let us know what you're using. And then we've also heard from some people that using the online closure compiler is a bit of a pain. And in some cases, people are using it for testing and hitting the limits. So we plan on moving to a local build as the default. Around accessibility, we've been starting with just core APIs for people. And the keyboard navigation is the first set of those APIs. We think that they're pretty usable as they are, um, but we haven't had much time to test with users. So we'd like to see uh, researchers and other folks building on those APIs, tell us what works, what doesn't work, trying them out with users, and we'll make tweaks to both the UI and the APIs as we go. Uh, so, so yeah, if you use any of those, if you have students who have disabilities or other impairments, please try out some of these features. Let us know how it goes and what we can improve. We are also looking at direct accessibility research. We've been talking a lot with Stephanie Ludi at the University of North Texas. She's doing research on user mental models in block programming, as well as with Lauren Milne at McAllister College. She's been looking at touch accessibility for tablets. We're very excited about both of those projects and to see what feedback and what standards we can learn from them. Something else we've seen researchers building but don't have a good general approach to is text or audible representations of blocks. So if you are interested in research in this area or you are already doing research in this area, please let us know. We would love to see some sort of generic way to represent blocks that can then be used kind of across Blockly's users. And of course, we are always talking with all of our developers. That is the primary goal of the summit, is for us to talk with everyone and get all of this feedback to hear about what you need. Um, and we also are very active on our developer forum. So if you haven't been to the Blockly developer forum before, um, please go say hi there, ask questions there. We try to respond within one business day, and we also have a lot of other developers who are quite active as well. As to future work, we are looking at two kind of main pillars for the next year. The first is expanding the block coding toolkit that comes with Blockly. This covers both new features to Blockly as well as things that can accompany Blockly. So new tools or new ways for building on top of Blockly. And the other is supporting CS education and kind of that set of needs from our users or from our developers. So around those topics, real-time collaboration is something we're interested in building a demo out in Blockly. The App Inventor team has done a lot of research in this already and has a lot of very interesting results that Evan's going to be talking about later. But we would like to build out a kind of starting point for other developers to build on top of that. Uh, the events in Blockly were intended to support this. Neil actually used to work on real-time collaboration in Docs, and so designed the event framework with that in mind. And we'll be exploring a demo using just a simple server for ordering events and playing around with different ways that you can then, that users can interact with each other, building off on a lot of what Evan's team at App Inventor has been doing. Event scripting is another area we might start exploring next year. We think this would be really useful for tutorials, for tools to help students or give them feedback. We are specifically looking at how to record events and play back events with animations as a way to make Blockly more interactive. And search is a feature that we've had requests for a long time. Some developers do have versions of this. App Inventor, again, has a block search. Oh. App Inventor has 3 different implementations, which are not in production. Yeah. Yep. But we think that this is something we can just pull into Blockly and make a standard part of the library, and open it up to more developers to use. And then something that we don't have on our current roadmap, but we are always interested in seeing, and we've done some experiments in the past, is a better phone UI. There are some interesting projects such as Grasshopper around building coding on phones, but on our team we haven't found a model that really clicks for people for more drag and drop block style coding. So if you are doing work in this area, please let us know. We'd love to hear your ideas or what you've been thinking of. And with that, we still have, I think, 15 minutes because we've been going pretty fast. So I'd just like to open it up to questions, thoughts, ideas, any other requests or features you would like us to think about on our roadmap. So the question is or the request is creating a block where it has inputs on both sides, so that you could do a language that kind of goes down but takes input from both directions. Yep. Oh, I think Evan's hand. Yeah. So for the recording, the two ideas that were just discussed are auto scroll on drag and better mutator UIs. We've known for a while that the mutator UI is extremely powerful, but for a lot of new users, it's not that intuitive. Yeah. So the request was better custom warnings for field bound, for field checking. Mm. And being able to pass that through connections, if you are, say, dropping a number block into a block that takes a number, but has limits on what those numbers can be. Question about what happened to workspace comments.
So workspace comments actually are there. They've been totally usable, and there was no UI to create them, and you had to add that UI. You had to add that as a right-click option. I believe in this release they're actually not there right now. We're planning to go through and do some cleanup work on them because they've been in there kind of halfway done for a while. But yeah, we expect them to be there and be an option. If you serialize them, for instance, or right now, like we will deserialize them happily. There you have to actually add an option on the context menu, but there is nothing that will stop you from doing that. A great example of developer APIs that we're really proud of right now.
Request for better support for scoped variables. There was also a claim that functions support scoped variables, but that's not quite true because those variables are also global. They sort of get scoped when they generate to a language, but yeah. So a request to be able to drag blocks between workspaces. Yes, and standard support for multiple workspaces, which is something we do try to support, but there might still be some overlap or some things that are missing. Jacqueline? Yep. Yep. So the request was better connection points for embedded blocks, because especially with the new renderer, which doesn't have a puzzle tab to make it easy to align. Is this different than our collapsed block feature? So there's a right click menu option on blocks to collapse them. Yep. Yeah. In the general request is better ways to organize large sets of blocks. Yeah. Feature request for exporting as an image. Interesting note. Well,
But you can't import an SVG into.
so interesting note on that. Sam actually implemented that a couple of weeks ago.
I've implemented it too. I just know this is
Yep.
students' projects.
Yep. So. So Sam just implemented that a couple of weeks ago in the playground. That is probably something we could add as an option you can turn on. Yep.
So Sam implemented that on the playground. We aren't shipping it right now because it's actually much more of a multi-browser problem, multi-platform problem. So the basic version of it, if like in a specific browser, is pretty trivial. We've got that, and we'll be looking at how we can expand that to be compatible.
The read-only text fields that can be copied but not edited. Yeah. And another request for a type of read-only workspace where you can still copy blocks off of it and collapse blocks. But you just can't change the blocks or move them around. The next request was for bidirectional blocks to code. So instead of just going blocks to code, being able to go back code to blocks. So next request was revisiting the minimap so that it's easier to navigate around large workspaces. For those who don't know, we did build a minimap demo, which was just a very small rendering of the main workspace with a little box showing you where you were. It's not very performant efficient. It's not very performant, which is why we never released it. So finding a nicer way to do that. So I believe there is now a configuration. Yeah, there are now options to scroll instead of zoom. So the request was scrolling instead of zooming with the trackpad, which is now an option. So yep, screen reader support for blocks. So the question is how we see Blockly as it relates to kids versus apps. As a team, we see Blockly as a fairly general purpose library that can be used for anything. Um, and so we try very hard to support both education and enterprise applications of it. Um, our main focus is on education. So as we prioritize features, we will generally prioritize ones that support CS education first. Um, but a lot of features can be used by both enterprise and education. And we we will also try not to break any enterprise use cases. So they're both important to us. It's just a matter of how we prioritize. So the request was for sort of an in between for collapsible blocks, where you can have basic settings on a block and then expand it for advanced settings on that block. Mm. Yep. Neil makes another point. We don't generally hear from enterprise apps about what they're building, which also makes it a bit harder to prioritize those features. There are a few companies that tell us what they're doing, but if you are an enterprise user and you are building something on Blockly, if you let us know what features you need or what use cases you have, that will also help us prioritize some of that. So request was for composable on-change behavior so that blocks can have more advanced functionality that is shared with other blocks. So the question was whether we would consider removing the closure compiler and moving to ES6 modules. Um, as of right now, Blockly isn't. We've made the decision to keep supporting ES5 and to use closure compiler as our default. Um, a lot of our users are in schools, especially in developing countries where their software doesn't update very often, which means we also support back to IE11. Which is why we tend to use a lot of older technology. Um, I don't know if we would release demos or examples of how to build on using other systems, but we don't have any short-term plans for that. And as Sam pointed out, with our NPM demos, we have been wrapping Blockly code. And an option would be to do something similar to wrap Blockly's files with ES6 modules. Right. I think with that, we are actually at time for the next talk.